A wedding in bloom. The scent of roasting boar mingled with sugared plums, a heady perfume that drifted through the castle courtyards. Servants scurried, draping garlands of roses and lilies, their laughter echoing against the ancient stone walls. Banners bearing the Penhaligon crest snapped in the gentle breeze, proclaiming a day of unparalleled joy. Yet, the air thrummed with a nervous energy, a dissonance beneath the veneer of celebration. In her small herb garden nestled beside the castle walls, Clara Meadowsweet snipped sprigs of rosemary, her movements precise and deliberate. Sunlight warmed her face, but her eyes, usually bright and full of mirth, held a distant, troubled gaze. Today she would become Princess Clara, wife to Arthur. A gilded cage, perhaps? She rubbed a leaf between her fingers, inhaling the sharp, earthy scent, a grounding force in the swirling chaos. The herbs, at least, were predictable, reliable. Unlike the man she was about to marry. Upstairs, in the royal chambers, Arthur paced the length of the Persian rug, his usually immaculate attire rumpled, his brow furrowed. The heavy brocade curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow, mirroring the turmoil within him. He loosened his collar, the ornate embroidery suddenly feeling like a noose. Outside, the music swelled, a joyful cacophony that grated on his nerves. He glanced at the window, at the blur of activity below. He should be eager, excited. Shouldn't he? But a cold dread coiled in his stomach, a premonition he couldn't shake. The ornate mirror reflected a pale, haunted face, a stark contrast to the confident prince the kingdom expected to see. He felt trapped, the weight of expectation crushing him. The altar of broken vows. The organ swelled, filling the ancient chapel with a triumphant fanfare that felt, to Clara, more like a dirge. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the aisle in hues of ruby and sapphire, but Clara saw only gray. Her silk gown felt heavy, constricting. She focused on the altar, a cold slab of marble that seemed to mock her with its promise of permanence. Arthur stood waiting, a handsome figure in his tailored coat, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. As she drew closer, she noticed a tremor in his hands, a sheen of perspiration on his brow. Doubt, like a venomous serpent, coiled in her stomach. The vicar cleared his throat, his voice booming through the chapel. "Arthur Penhaligon, do you take Clara Meadowsweet to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Silence. A silence so profound it amplified the rustle of her dress, the frantic beat of her heart. Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He looked at Clara, his expression a battleground of conflicting emotions. I cannot." The words, barely a whisper, ripped through the air. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. The chapel seemed to tilt. Arthur took a step forward, his voice gaining strength, laced with a desperate plea. "I cannot marry Clara. My heart belongs to another. To Beatrice." A collective gasp swept through the congregation. Clara's vision blurred. Beatrice, her sister, stood frozen near the back, her face a mask of horror. The triumphant organ music died, replaced by a ringing silence, broken only by Clara's choked sob. The altar, once a symbol of hope, now stood as the altar of broken vows. A sorceress is born. The silk of her wedding gown felt like a shroud. Clara tore at the heavy fabric as she rode, the rhythmic thud of her stolen destriers' hooves the only sound louder than the scream trapped in her throat. Arthur's words, cruelly precise, echoed with each mile she put between herself and the kingdom. "I cannot. My heart belongs to another." She rode for days, fueled by humiliation and a gnawing emptiness. The sun bleached the gold from her hair, the wind whipped tears that tasted of salt and bitterness. Finally, deep within a forgotten forest, the horse refused to go further. Clara dismounted, her legs trembling, and stumbled forward. The air grew heavy, sweet with the scent of unseen blossoms. Sunlight dripped through the canopy, illuminating a circle of ancient stones overgrown with moss. In the center, a spring bubbled, its water shimmering with an ethereal light. This was no ordinary place. Drawn by an invisible force, Clara knelt beside the spring. She cupped her hands, the water icy against her skin, and drank. A jolt, like lightning, coursed through her. Visions flooded her mind, swirling nebulae, whispering trees, the raw, untamed power of the earth. She understood. This grove was a place of beginnings, of transformation. Abandoning her tattered wedding gown, she plunged into the pool. The water embraced her, cleansing not just her body, but her spirit. Clara Meadowsweet, the heartbroken bride, was gone. From the depths emerged something new, something powerful. Morgana was born. Her training began with the rising of the moon. The King's Folly. The bells of Camelot pealed, a brassy counterpoint to the hollow ache in Arthur's chest. He stood beside Beatrice, her hand cold and stiff in his. Her gown, a cascade of emerald silk, shimmered under the summer sun, but her smile felt brittle, a facade painted on porcelain. He recited the vows, each word a stone added to the tomb of his happiness. The cheers of the crowd were a dull roar, lost in the echo of Clara's name within his heart. The celebrations were a blur of forced smiles and empty conversation. Arthur excused himself, seeking refuge in the gardens. The roses, Clara's favorite, bloomed riotously, their perfume a sharp reminder. He sank onto a stone bench, the weight of the crown pressing heavily on his brow. Later, in the echoing emptiness of their royal chambers, Beatrice confronted him. "You barely touched my hand today, Arthur. Is there something you wish to confess?" Her voice was a silken threat, devoid of warmth. He looked at her, at the calculating glint in her eyes, and the truth spilled out. "I love another." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Beatrice's face hardened. "A foolish sentiment," she hissed. "Love is a weakness. Power is strength. And you, Arthur, are king." She turned her back on him, dismissing him as if he were a troublesome servant. Weeks turned into months. Arthur threw himself into his duties, but Beatrice's influence permeated everything. Taxes rose, trade faltered, and whispers of discontent grew louder in the marketplace. Petitions piled on his desk, each a testament to the kingdom's growing unease. He longed for Clara's counsel, her gentle wisdom, but she was gone, and he was left with the chilling realization that he had traded compassion for cold ambition, and his kingdom was paying the price. The thirsty land. The cracked earth groaned under Arthur's boots, a mournful sound that echoed the kingdom's despair. Fields, once emerald green, were now brittle brown, choked with dust devils dancing like mocking spirits. The river Penhaligon, his namesake and the lifeblood of the land, was a sluggish trickle exposing skeletal ribs of rock. Even the air tasted of dust and despair. Inside the stifling council chamber, the atmosphere was no less parched. Lord Elmsworth, his face etched with worry lines, wrung his hands. "The wells are drying up, your majesty. The crops have failed. The people, they are starting to lose hope." Arthur felt the weight of their gaze, a collective accusation. He knew they blamed him, and perhaps they were right. His frivolous spending on the wedding, the lavish feasts, now seemed obscene in the face of such suffering. "There is talk," began Lady Beatrice, her voice tight, "of the sorceress Morgana. They say she holds sway over the elements. Some believe she could bring rain." A murmur rippled through the room. Morgana. The name was whispered with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Arthur, remembering the tales of her power, felt a shiver crawl down his spine. He'd always dismissed them as folklore. "Now, it is a risk," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. "But we have little choice." He paused, a sudden, unexpected confession rising in his throat. "Before we send envoys, there is something I must tell you all." He looked at the faces around the table, his heart heavy. "I cannot marry Alara. My heart, it belongs to another." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the dry rasp of the wind against the shutters, a whisper of the thirsty land demanding to be quenched. A plea to Morgana. The grasping branches of the whisperwood tore at Arthur's mantle as he ventured deeper, each soughing leaf a derisive echo of his foolish quest. A burden of guilt, far exceeding the weight of his plate, pinned his shoulders. He had to locate Clara. He had to plead for forgiveness. He discovered her, not nestled in a flower-decked bower as he'd envisioned, but in a hoarfrost-rhymed glade, a ring of monoliths her sole company. The atmosphere thrummed with a palpable power, spooking his destrier. Clara stood motionless at the center, her back presented to him, a violet cloak melding seamlessly with the encroaching dusk. "Clara," he began, his voice roughened by dread. She remained unresponsive. "Morgana," he amended, the name an acrid taste on his tongue. Deliberately, she turned, her features devoid of any warmth. The Clara he cherished, the woman who once wove wildflowers through his hair, had vanished. Replacing her was an icy queen. "Arthur," she uttered, the word a sliver of ice. "To what misfortune do I owe this intrusion?" "Camelot is failing," he confessed, laying bare his kingdom's ills. "The barren fields, the sudden plague. Only you possess the power to heal it." A cruel amusement flickered across her face. "And why should I offer aid? You scorn me openly, Arthur. You cast me aside for her." Venom laced the simple pronoun. "You betrayed your oaths, shattered my heart, and now, when your realm lies on the brink, you come groveling at my feet?" He swallowed, the truth a bitter draught. "I love Guinevere, that's truth. But I erred gravely in wounding you in believing my love sufficient to negate our bond. Morgana, I implore you, quell your fury. Save our people from ruin." Her eyes blazed and the gale intensified within the clearing, contorting the ancient trees. "Love," she scorned. "You comprehend nothing of love, Arthur Penhaligon. Leave this place, before I decide your suffering should be prolonged." 3 impossible tasks. 3 tasks, Arthur, Morgana's voice echoed, amplified by the cavernous hall. 3 impossible tasks to prove the change you claim resides within you. 3 acts of contrition to weigh against the suffering you've wrought. Arthur swallowed, the air thick with the scent of ozone and damp stone. Lightning flickered beyond the entrance, mirroring the storm in his chest. "Name them," he rasped, his gaze fixed on her unwavering stare. "First," Morgana's voice dripped with malice, "you will retrieve a single tear shed by Clara Meadowsweet on the day you abandoned her. Not coerced, not feigned. A genuine tear of heartbreak freely given to you in forgiveness." Arthur winced, the memory of Clara's devastated face searing his mind. "And the second? You will weave a tapestry from the whispers of the wind," she continued, ignoring his pained expression. "A tapestry that captures the lament of the forest for the lives lost in your foolish war." He closed his eyes briefly, picturing the endless, gnarled branches of the ancient trees, each rustle a sigh. "And the last? You will bring me the heart of the beast that dwells within you," Morgana finished, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Not its physical heart, but the darkness, the pride, the arrogance that led you to this precipice." He nodded, a grim determination hardening his features. "I accept." He turned to leave, the weight of the task settling upon him like a shroud. His first stop, the small cottage where Clara now resided, shuttered and silent. He steeled himself, knowing this would be the hardest task of all. The salty tang of rain filled the air as he raised his hand to knock. He hesitated. What could he possibly say? Trials of remorse. The volcano exhaled a gritty cloud, a dark smudge against the violet dusk. Ash-coated Arthur's mouth, the bitter taste of dread clinging to it. The phoenix's home reeked of sulfur and old failings, an apt perfume for his own penitence. He was after a feather, one shimmering plume, but the creature guarding it wasn't open to parley. He picked his way down into the caldera, the heat of physical weight on his chest. He felt the phoenix's scrutiny and age-old assessment piercing him. "I understand my mistakes," he yelled above the earth's tremor, his voice frayed at the edges. "I know I wounded her." Later, bruised and singed, he staggered out, the feather a frigid brand in his grasp. After that, the sea serpent. Its fury echoed the turmoil in his own soul. He stood at the cliff's edge, wind tearing at his hair, and began to sing. Not a proud warrior's boast, but a simple, aching song of apology, its melody stripped bare. The serpent paused, ancient eyes softening to jade, and the ocean stilled. Last, the riddle. Chiseled into time-worn rock, it sought not brawn, but insight. "I spring from grief, thrive in remorse, and flower only in the dawn of forgiveness. What am I?" He squeezed his eyes shut, visions of Alara and Isolde flickering behind them. The solution was a painful understanding. Love, he breathed, the word laden with the burden of his actions. A love that rises from grief, matures in regret, and blossoms solely through redemption. The stones groaned open, revealing the next stage of his journey. A kingdom restored, a heart unchanged. The final syllable of the incantation resonated, unleashing a shimmering emerald cascade. The thirsty earth welcomed the rain, a light drizzle swelling into a torrent of revitalization. A cheer went up, a stark contrast to the venom contorting Beatrice's face. She struck with blinding speed, a silver flash targeting not Morgana's heart, but the amulet, the fount of her power. A strangled utterance burst from Beatrice as she tore the artifact away. Instead of dominion, however, a backlash of dark energy warped her face into a grotesque mask of fury. A primeval curse erupted, seeking purchase. Arthur reacted instinctively, a blur of motion. He intercepted the curse, shoving Morgana aside just as it struck. Agony bloomed within him, stealing his breath. Morgana, stunned, caught his faltering form. "Arthur, no." The cry was thick with disbelief. He managed a weak smile. "Worth it," he rasped. "Had to." His gaze, heavy with unspoken feelings, locked on hers before drifting towards Clara, who stood weeping at the edge of the throng. Remorse gnawed at him. He had failed them both. Recovering swiftly, Morgana unleashed her own power, battling the curse infecting Arthur. The dark magic thrashed, then yielded to her assault, leaving Arthur drained but alive. She rose, her features etched with cold resolve. "You saved me, Arthur. I acknowledge the debt." A pause, then her gaze hardened. "But saving my life does not absolve you. My people are free, the land is renewed. For that I am grateful. But I cannot offer forgiveness, Arthur. Not for abandoning Clara to her fate. Not for the suffering you inflicted on so many." She turned and walked away, leaving Arthur to confront the consequences of his choices in the relentless downpour.